Hi, and welcome back to your favorite faceless masked commentator. I share my personal thoughts on news and things I find interesting. If you enjoy, subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video. NATO has a big problem, even worse than I thought. We thought they abandoned us with the Strait, but the truth may be even worse than we think. With America as Europe's army, they literally spent their money on everything besides their own self-defense. And it's showing through the UK picking a pussy fight with Russia. Can't blame them when you only have one Navy destroyer in your entire arsenal of Navy warfare. That's pathetic. NATO Secretary Mark Rutte knows it, which is why he's kissing Trump's feet on CNN and Fox. They're starting to catch on to America potentially pulling out. The gears are already in motion on how the US can even the playing field against the current NATO agreement. At the very least, it was enough to get France to lead a multinational support campaign to help out in the Strait. Let's rewind to the heart of Operation Epic Fury. The US was pushing hard for NATO support, especially to help reopen the Strait and get global oil prices under control. But several NATO countries refused. Most of them refused to let us use our own American-funded military bases to refuel and supply. Most denied us airspace to shorten our flight paths. Hypothetically speaking, this might have shortened the war a bit. Trump was always critical of NATO long before the war, which was one reason he pushed them to finally start meeting their 5% defense investment. Their response during the war gave him a lot of validation, to say the least. In short, NATO was tested, and nearly all of them failed. To be blunt, NATO does not exist without America. We contribute more than triple of our members' combined finances, all while providing security against Russia. What the fuck are we doing this for if we can't even use our bases? NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte got the message loud and clear and immediately went to kiss ass at the White House. He showed up on both CNN and Fox News with nothing but good things to say about the president. What he said doesn't matter much. What he proved, however, was that there were NATO allies that have realized how bad the idea of the US leaving is and begun bending over backwards for us. Fast forward to the ceasefire, and we have France President Emmanuel Macron leading 15 countries in a defensive mission to facilitate the resumption of traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. On April 8th, he held a Defense and Security Council meeting at the Élysée Palace right after two French nationals, Cécile Kohler and Jacques Paris, were freed by Iran following 3.5 years in detention. I'd say better late than never, but if they've cooperated earlier, the US could have helped negotiate something in France's favor. And that's being nice. In all honesty, I'm starting to feel bad for NATO at this point. I don't think they abandoned us. Rather, most are incapable of helping. Back in March, Britain's Defense Secretary John Healey told the BBC that UK forces are now ready to act, to board and detain ships from Russia's so-called shadow fleet operating in UK waters. Russia has been accused of running these vessels without a valid national flag to dodge sanctions on oil and keep money flowing into its war in Ukraine. They had a legal basis and everything. In all metrics, it's a good strategy on paper, but it ran into two stupidly comical problems. The first is that Russia doesn't take the UK or any of NATO seriously. A famous fake quote from him states, "I don't fear the United Kingdom. They can't even stop rubber boats invading their country or foreign men raping their women and children." Again, this is an unverified quote, but not only is the meaning behind the quote true, it's well in line with Putin's thoughts on liberalism in its current form. The UK has wholeheartedly embraced liberalism. This is also backed up by the second stupidly comical problem. The UK doesn't have a real navy. An opinion piece from Patrick Christie's from Sky News London revealed that the UK only had one functioning destroyer. Go back 5 seconds and hear that again. In addition, it had to be taken off the water because they found an issue with the water drainage. Even worse, John Healey on LBC radio had a hell of a time answering the simple question of how many frigates or destroyers the Royal Navy had ready to deploy. He eventually landed on 17, but from watching that clip, you can bet the number was made up to get off the question. Russia's response to UK provocation was very minimal. They sent that same tanker through English waters with only one small combat ship as an escort. Nothing happened. The ship went through with no challenge. England didn't retaliate or even comment about it ordeal. You can't write this shit. It's just sad. As far as what our off-ramp from NATO is, a few interesting frameworks have been thrown around. I like Dr. Steve Turley's coverage on this, so I'll use him as a reference. At its core, NATO is a one-sided arrangement that guarantees America defense. With this in mind, there are three paths for us. The first path is dormant NATO, proposed by Trump advisor Sumantra Mitra. In short, America shows up for existential crises only. America transfers all operational warfare fighting commands to Europeans. Europeans handle their own defense. The second path is a two-tier NATO, an idea resurfaced from Keith Kellogg, a retired lieutenant general. Remember when I mentioned how Donald Trump bullied NATO allies into spending more on the alliance? Those who don't reach the 5% GDP mark loses protection from America if they're attacked, or at the very least, a downgraded commitment, as Steve puts it. I personally lean towards this method. As I mentioned before, some of these allies are starting to wake up and get on the right track. This framework gives them a chance while setting clear standards to freeloaders like Spain. The most radical third path is similar to what many have been saying. We restructure NATO to only include those that we know are going to contribute or at least willing to try. We're talking complete overhaul of the terms through a bilateral security agreement. It rewards those that either showed up with Iran, met their financial commitments, or stayed completely neutral. By neutral, I mean not bad-mouthing Trump without leverage when he was clearly right about NATO. For my personal thoughts, NATO is a perfect example of why the idea of relying on others feels good but isn't sustainable. You see this concept in many movies, video games, and anime through the power of friendship. The reason why this isn't sustainable is because of an undisputable truth. You can't have enforcement without force. If you can't defend yourself, you can't uphold anything that you value. That's why you appeal to the stronger. Before Donald Trump, NATO genuinely believed that their security was guaranteed by America. This is proven by them spending their money on everything but defense and how some avoided paying their 2% as agreed upon. When Donald Trump challenged the simple question of what's in it for us, some backstabbed and others turned their heads in shame. Your own defense secretary can't even answer a question of how many warships you have. You got a handful of working ships and you think you have the balls to lecture us on anything defense or security related. Without a stable military, the UK is nothing but a plot of land waiting to be taken over. The US and Russia thinking so little of you is the only reason why that hasn't happened. To the UK's own liberal views, what the fuck are you gonna do if someone crazier than Donald Trump decides to take over the UK? How are you gonna fight back? From where I'm sitting, either bend over to Muslims or bend over to America. Which hole do you want it in? Because you're getting fucked regardless. Let me know in the comments what you think about NATO's future. If you found my commentary interesting, subscribe to the channel and drop a like. Thanks for watching.